Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wealth Wednesday show. As usual, Wednesdays are the days where we get to invite a guest to share with us on matters of money management and business management. And today, we are so honored to have a guest uh, by the name Mr. Will. He is the founder of Blue Tree Saving. He will give us more information during his introduction. But just to highlight, um, Mr. Will is the founder of Blue Tree, which is an organization that is focused on teaching parents and children how to save and invest money. We can all agree that as parents, as guardians, as teachers, we have done some little bit of effort in teaching kids how to save money, which is a big plus. However, just stopping at saving is not that good. We need to teach our children how they can invest. Remember, for you to be able to multiply money, you can only do that through investing. So, as a parent, as a guardian, as an adult around kids, you need to know, how can I teach my child how to invest so that when they grow up, when they become adults, they will have a solid financial foundation. And that is what we shall be tackling tonight. Remember, the topic is teaching kids and teens how to invest in the stock market. We shall not be limited to stock market. We shall cut across other areas where Mr. Will tell us more on how to go about it, how to make kids understand various investment concepts. Because I know you cannot start telling a 13-year-old that this is risky, this market is so volatile. He or she will be asking you, what is volatile? So you have to know how to break it down to them so that they understand and be able to actually take it up. So once again, Mr. Will, thank you so much for joining, for accepting to join us in the show. As Financial Wellness Center, we are truly honored and really grateful for giving us that opportunity.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
To our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. We encourage you to share this link out, press the subscribe button, as well as keep sharing any feedback you might be having in the comment section. If you have any questions, just write it up in the comments and we shall be answering your questions towards the end, as well as write us a hi and tell us where you're watching this live session from, and be guaranteed we shall be giving you a shout out as we progress. So at this juncture, allow me to give Mr. Will the platform for him to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about himself and what inspired him to start the Blue Tree Saving Limited. Mr. Will, feel welcomed and take over the platform.
Okay, thank you very much. So a bit about me. So I'm an actuary by background. When I first qualified from university, I had actuarial science, which means valuing lots of different risks and doing lots of statistics. Then after university, I joined a consulting firm to sort of do valuations of pensions. Then about 3 years after that, I decided I want to do something a bit more interesting. So I kind of went into the world of investments. So I started so this is in the UK, started advising very, very large corporates and institutions on their investments. So I was working with pension schemes, insurance companies, and even some governments. So I did that in the UK for over 9 years. And then I decided to move to Hong Kong with my family to carry on a kind of similar role, but now dealing with sort of Asian institutes. So I was kind of giving kind of investment advice of the order of like billions of dollars, US dollars, and seeing the impact that could have. But at the same time, I had my own family, 2 young daughters, and I was doing some investments on their behalf and talking to my friends about what they're doing with their kids and their kids' money. And it turns out they weren't doing very much. And a lot of that came down to that they didn't really know what to do, and there's no really resources out there. So they knew some of the very, very basics of giving an allowance or pocket money, and maybe set up a savings account for their children, but not much else. So that's why I felt at that time, maybe this is something where I can really add some value using kind of my investment knowledge and investment finance knowledge to really help as many parents as possible. Because I'm a strong believer that if children can grow up knowing about money from an early age, they can have such a big advantage in life. They can potentially avoid debts. They'll have confidence and self-esteem and less money worries. And especially in the developed world where many young adults are suffering from financial stress. And a lot of that comes down to that no one ever taught them what to do. So it's great that stuff like the Financial Wellness Centre is helping so many of those people who are struggling to do better. My main goal is to make sure that we prevent them from having a problem when they grow up. And so, so what I do now is I write kind of weekly blogs to really aimed at the parents, to sort of empower the parents to sort of learn a new subject and then be able to write that in an engaging way that they can then go and talk to their children. Because I think money is an ongoing conversation, and the more that the parents are involved, the more that the children are going to learn from the parents, and on a sort of a weekly, daily, any kind of basis. So I write many different topics, whether that's about just savings habits, about just general savings, whether that's about debt or tax or mortgages. But one of the most popular ones has been about how to teach your kids about the stock market. And hence the kind of conversation that we'll have today, because I'm just a big believer that if people can learn to invest from a young age, then just that power of compound interest over time is just phenomenal. And I didn't start investing myself until kind of sort of late 20s, and I really wish I had started earlier. So that's that's why I started Blue Tree.
Yeah, exactly. I've been checking your website, the Blue Tree Saving, and I must say you are doing an amazing job. I know towards the end you'll share your website so that people can find you and get to acquire more information. And I am so honored based on the introduction you've provided. You are a gem, and of course you have vast knowledge from different countries and different organizations. All now you put it together so that you can provide, I don't want to say the toppest, but you can provide information to people out there from different perspectives. So to our viewers, I can see we have teaching kids to buy stocks. He or she is saying, watching from St. Clement, CA, big fan of Mr. Will Rainey. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you for joining in. I can see we have John Kiranki. He's saying hello. Hello to Mr. John. We are so excited to see you on the show, and we hope you're going to learn. And of course, you are sharing the link out to your networks so that they can as well learn from our very noble guest, Mr. Will. So without taking too much time, we shall get into the first question immediately. So just a second, I think. Where is the question? Yeah, we shall be getting into the first question right away. And to start off, Mr. Will, maybe you could tell us, is there a specific age where a parent or a guardian should focus on teaching kids about money or investing, or we should just cut across from anywhere?
Yeah, I think there's, not in terms of investing, but in terms of talking to the kids about money in general, the subject, then the earlier the better. There's so much research that says that if you can teach your kids from probably about the age of 4, when they've got good understanding of numbers and appreciation that money exists, then you can start teaching them about not spending all their money and starting to save. Because what happens is that if children don't learn about money from even a young age, they'll just see money as something that you can spend. And that's all they'll learn. Unless parents come in and teach them that they need to save and why they need to save, their first impression is going to be money is for spending. And if over time they'll find very strong bonds with that, and therefore they'll spend, they'll have spending habits. And we already know probably many young children who like to impulse buy. They, as soon as they get some money, they like to go and buy some sweets or the toys, and they want to spend all their money because it's just fun. So even from as young as 4, because by the age of 7, they would have already formed some quite strong habits already to do with money. So being able to talk to your kids, even from as young as 4, just about savings and what money is for, can have huge benefits, because, as I say, by the time they get a bit older, you might have to unwind some of the sort of bad habits that they might have already picked up from either observing you or observing other people. So that's a very powerful one. In terms of talking about investments, so I've got 2 young daughters, and from a very young age, we started investing for them on their behalf. So just putting some money away. Then as they kind of got older, to about 4 or 5, we said to them, we started giving them pocket money or allowance, depending on where you are in the world, each week. And we gave them some options, and we essentially said, right, think of money as like a seed, and you can give those seeds away, so that's spending, or you can plant them. And if you plant it, it's saving. So we've essentially allowed them to say, well, how much of your pocket allowance do you want to give away, and how much do you want to plant? And then we'd always encourage them to plant some. And if they planted it, then that money would go off into the investment account that we'd set up for them. And what we'd show them is these kind of blue trees. I had a little program on my computer, and it's the tool, and it shows them these kind of blue trees kind of growing. So the more they saved, the more of these trees they started to see. So they, even from about 4 years old, they kind of got this concept of saving and the benefits of saving, and as time goes on. But we didn't really go through what those blue trees were. We just said they're savings and they'll grow. And then my eldest daughter got to around the age of 7.5. I thought, right, I'm going to have a go at trying to explain investing to her. And so we had a conversation. It was about 20 minutes. And it was really, I was surprised. She just kind of picked up on some of the concepts really quickly. I'll go through a bit about how I kind of went through that in concept, but she really engaged, asked some fantastic questions. And then the next day she even did a little presentation to her school friends about the stock market. So it kind of just shows how much she was able to pick up. Granted, she didn't know all the intricacies of the stock market, because most people don't need to know those, but she was able to give a good understanding about what it is, even at the age of 7. And she still can talk about it today. Even my 4 at the time, my other daughter was just nearly 5 years old, and she could kind of get some of the concept. Clearly she's a bit younger, but she kind of gets some of the ideas about that. If you invest in the stock market, you own a piece of a company, and she gets that straight away. So yeah, no, to answer your question, talk about money from age of 4, and from the age of 7, they can really pick up some of the basics of the investing in the stock market.
Wow, that is so profound, and I actually agree with you from the age of 4, because if a kid can go with you into a supermarket and cry for a candy, it means that you can instill a concept of saving and bring in the concept of investing or multiplying money at such an age, because they are now able to know things and also pick, like, I want a sweet. So you can also teach them that you can delay your gratification for sweet, you save the money, then get maybe a whole packet at the end of the month. So yeah, I totally agree with you. And I must say, you are really doing an amazing job to your family, especially your kids. They will at one point really appreciate you for the lessons you've taught them about investing. And just to mention, I like your analogy of the tree and investing. When I saw that article, I was like, this one I haven't come across such an analogy, but it helps bring out the concept of investing, especially for kids and people who are trying to learn about investing in a very simple way. I hope you'll be able to, highlight it as we go by.
Sure, I will do.
So maybe you could share with us what's the best investment for teenagers and kids, because you cannot tell a 4-year-old to invest in real estate, or even a 7-year-old. You cannot start telling them you need to invest in real estate. They'll be like, why do I need to own a house? Mommy and daddy have a house, so why
Yeah.
should I even bother? So maybe you could tell us what is the best investment for teenagers and kids.
Yeah, I think it's down. So, whether this, my opinion, whether it's children, teenagers, adults, or
Mm,
say even in my past corporate life of very large institutions, the best
mhm,
investment links to how much time you have, and how much time you have until you need that money. And the good thing about
mhm,
children is that
mm,
when they're saving, some of that money they don't need until they're 18 years old. So they have such a
yeah,
long time. And it
mm,
means the longer the time you can take, it means you can take more risk. And
mhm,
therefore, probably more the parents on behalf of their children should start to think about investing in the stock market for those children,
mhm,
because you can
mhm,
start with small amounts and you can add to
mm,
it over time. And then as the children get older, they can start adding to that themselves. Um, as you say, real estate is probably not practical because you need a large sum of money
yeah,
to do that, and we don't know it's just not physically impractical to actually do. Whereas actually investing in the stock market is very practical and it can be done. Again, it will
mhm,
require the parents' help, but that's the same as opening a bank account as well. A child would need their parents to help. For teenagers, again, it
mhm,
comes down to their time horizon. So if they want to be using some of their savings for buying their first car when they're 17 years old or 18 years old, and they're only a
mhm,
few years away from them, then investing in the stock market is not for them, because the time, if they've only got a few years and they want to
mhm,
spend that money in a few years' time, the risks in the short term, because we know that
mhm,
the stock market does go down in the short term, as we've seen earlier this year,
yeah,
they don't want
mm,
to be selling their investments at that point in time to buy their car. So
mhm,
if they've got some money that they want to keep for the very long term, then again, the stock market is probably the most simplest and can have one of the best returns. But it's all about
mhm,
saying to them, you have to have that long term. And in terms of what that is, for me, it would always be in a low cost global investment fund, because these funds will invest in thousands of different companies around the world
mhm,
in
mhm,
a low cost manner, rather than trying to pick in which company is going to do really well and which country is going to do really well. My view is
yeah,
even the
mm,
experts don't know. There's no way a child or a teenager is going to be able to find the winners. So it's much better to just try and invest in a fund like a
mhm,
Vanguard or a type fund, where they can get exposure to thousands and thousands of different companies all in one go in a
mm,
very low cost,
mhm.
simple way. And that's always going to be my view. If you're going to go in the stock market, do it that way. Don't go and think that you're going to be the next Wolf of Wall Street and picking the best stocks.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
So this kind of leads me to you've just mentioned as there are some things that kids cannot understand when it comes to investing, and of course for them the advantage they have is time, which as compared to us adults we don't have much time. That's why we invest in very high risk tools. But for kids, since they have time, it's better to invest in low risk tools. Of course, low risk tools will usually have lower interest, but it helps you take advantage of time. And this leads me to our next question is how can we introduce investing to teens, and can they really grasp this concept? Maybe you could give us now the tree analogy. You could mention it now.
Yeah, well, actually, before I do that, what I did with my daughters was when I first started talking, is I gave them a real life example. So, as I said, we actually invest in a fund and invest in thousands of the biggest companies. But I just took one of those companies to explain. So I used, in our case, McDonald's as an example, and I said, right, we invest on some of your savings. Some of that goes to McDonald's, and therefore you own a piece. So my daughters own a piece of McDonald's. So it means that when we go to the restaurant, we can kind of sit there and eat our food and watch people going up to the counter and buying their burgers and their Happy Meals and saying some of that money that those people are spending is ours because we own a piece of McDonald's. And it just gives them a sense of, wow, this is amazing. I own, granted, they don't understand that they own a really, really small piece, but straight away they're like, wow, because I've invested, I own a piece of this and I can see that. And so it made it really easy in real life for them to understand what that kind of investment was. And then, like we said, we also own Apple. So when we go to the Apple store and see people buying their new iPhones or iPads, again, some of that money is ours because we own a bit of Apple. And they straight away got this concept that the stock market and investing means that they own a piece of that company. And then sort of expand into everyone. So that worked out really well, and they could then ask lots of questions. What about this company? Do we own a bit of Disney? And we're like, yes, you do. So every time someone goes to Disneyland and buys a ticket, that money is a little bit of yours. So that just brings it really home to them in a real life way, and it makes it more real world rather than sitting there and sort of doing theoretical. It's much more. And then we say, going to the trees, as we said, every time we invest, they're planting a new tree, and then we say those trees grow, and that's because, and again, going back to the McDonald's example, when you give your money to McDonald's is going to take that money and they're going to use that to create new burgers or new Happy Meals, or they're going to open a new restaurant. And because they've got these new burgers or these new restaurants, they're going to have more customers spending money. And the more money McDonald's makes, the more it grows. And that's why your blue trees grow. So, and the more that McDonald's makes, the more money that you make because you're investing. And that's why their blue trees are growing over time. And because they're growing, and McDonald's gives some of that money back, i.e. a dividend, but we call it a seed. So the trees grow, those seeds, and they plant those seeds, and then they see new trees growing. And so straight away they've got the concept of compound interest, but using trees and seeds to show that even if you start with one tree, over a long period of time, you can have your own kind of financial forest. So that's how I kind of introduced that kind of very simplistic concept of investing to my kids.
Wow. That is so amazing. You know, even when I saw that article about trees and investing, it makes it so easy because a child can easily relate to a tree, and it's something they can watch and compare it to money. As well as you said, how you introduce stock to them. You going to a restaurant or a shop of a certain stock that you've bought, and you just sit there and watch how customers are maybe buying or transacting. That picture alone makes a kid to be more curious and want to do more when it comes with money, so that the next time he or she goes back to the same shop, he or she will be like, you know what? You continue buying, I'm making money. So I really like that analogy, and I would encourage our viewers, please, if you can, get this analogy and start using it. It's simple yet very informative. It will help, kids learn by pictorial representation. When they are able to relate something with a picture, then it sticks to their mind, and it gives them that curiosity to do it. And this will lead us to our next question. Briefly explain, how can we explain the difference between risk, reward, stocks, bonds, profits, and losses in kids' language, because this is a very difficult term even to some adults who are not in the finance world. You find someone asking you, "What is this stock that I hear people talking about all the time?" So maybe you could tell us, how can we break it down to a child so that he or she can understand it?
Sure. So I think the easiest way is carrying on that analogy about burgers, and that's exactly the conversation that I had with my children, is to say, so from a return point, we talked about how that money gets used to create new burgers or new restaurants to make money, and that's your return. Then we talked about the risk, and it's say, well, look, the stock market doesn't just always go up. And at the time that I was talking to my daughter around this, it was just at the start of the virus starting out. And so everyone was going into lockdown. And at the same time, the stock market fell quite significantly at that point in time. And it just gave me a nice little story to talk to my daughters about, to say, well, look, everyone is being put into their house. They're not allowed to leave their house because the rules of the government in the UK or other places in the world said you have to stay at home. And what this means is that no one's going out and buying burgers from McDonald's. So, and they could see that, they can visualize that we're not going to McDonald's, nor is anyone else. And it means that they understand straight away that they're not going to see these people going to the counter and buying the burgers that they were before. And therefore, McDonald's was not making as much money as it was before. And that's why whilst McDonald's still has to pay for their buildings and they still have to pay for their staff, they're not getting much money in. And that's why the investments can fall in that period of time. And that's how you can kind of understand the risks, that risk exists, because there's going to be periods of time when people aren't buying those burgers as they once were. But the key point on that was to say, because that's where lots of adults get very scared. They see the stock market falling. They go, "Oh no, the world's over. I've lost all this money." But the key lesson from the next part of that story is very, very important, to say, even though there is these events which can cause people to stop buying their burgers, they'll over a long enough period of time, in this case, the virus will find a way of controlling the virus, and people will be allowed out of their homes, and they'll start buying burgers again. And then they'll start creating new burgers, and they'll start opening new restaurants, and McDonald's will be getting the money back over time. And therefore, whilst your investment went down in that period of time, if you leave it long enough, it will go back up over a long period of time. Again, this is a generalization rather than talking about McDonald's or an endorsement for McDonald's, but it's just a very easy way for my daughters to sort of visualize an empty store. Okay, that's bad, but over time that store's not going to be empty, and it's going to be making money, and that's how. And again, that just helps them understand return, i.e. when people are buying burgers. Risk is when people aren't buying burgers. Profit is when they're selling more burgers compared to the costs, and they can get the loss. So they understand that. In terms of other investments that they could make, so you mentioned bonds or savings accounts is very similar. So we talk to our children about those different options, and going back to the tree analogy, we actually say they're like bushes. So anything like a savings account or a bond is, they grow, they produce seeds, a bit like the trees. They just grow a bit slower, and they're a bit more, if there's a storm, they're probably going to be less damaged than a big tree out there. So they can understand that there's these other options, but they know that they want trees. Trees they're going to be the biggest and the best over that period of time. So using the concept of trees and using real life examples. So the McDonald's one just worked very powerful, but again, you can choose Apple, you could choose Disney, anything that they know, to understand that money coming in means good for the stock market. Money, people not spending money with that company is going to lead to bad. So that was a very easy way. But then the other piece, which again got me to be a bit creative, was about how to manage risk. And again, this is something I'm very, very passionate about, is not putting money with one company. If you are going to invest in the stock market, don't just put all your money into one company like Apple, because if Apple goes bad, then you've lost all your money. But the way I kind of explained that to my daughters was to say that companies can go bust. So in the UK, and I don't know how global, but Blockbuster Video, I don't know if so Blockbusters, for those who don't, it's used to rent videos. So you'd essentially be back like a library. You'd go out, choose your favorite movie, get the video, and go back home. You have to go out. That company went bust because now everyone just sits at home and watches Netflix and streams their movie. So no one wants to go out and choose. So they've really got that kind of concept about how companies can go bust if they're not being creative going forward. And so what we then did is we had got 10 pieces of Lego bricks. And we said each company is one Lego brick. And they can say, right, this one is like Blockbuster, and this one's like McDonald's, and this one's like Apple, and this one's like Netflix. Just an example. And said, look, we'd rather have lots of them, because even if 2 of those companies go bust, so we essentially took 2 of the bricks and threw them away. So now you started with 10, but now you've only got 8. And most people would be very worried about that scenario. But what we sort of showed is, well, actually, but Netflix is still there, and Netflix can grow really big. So instead of being worth 1 brick, it can be worth 3 bricks. And the same thing for maybe Apple, it can be worth not just 1 brick, but lots more bricks. So whilst we started with 10, we lost 2 companies, but the other ones all grew. So we ended up with more bricks than we started with. And it was a very visual way for them. And they could start talking about which companies they liked in there. And it just was a really powerful way of showing that you shouldn't just invest in one company, because that one company could be like Blockbuster Video, and you don't want that. And you want to make sure that one of your bricks is going to be like Netflix, which can grow very large. The hard bit is we don't know which company is going to be like Netflix. The professionals who spend all their time and get paid very handsomely still struggle to find the best companies. So the best kind of view is to have a little bit of every company, and therefore the ones that you're always going to be exposed to those who do very well in that market. So again, just making it very visual, using toys and or Lego bricks makes it a lot more engaging. So it's not just sitting there and going through the theory and saying the stock market is the FTSE 100 and the S&P 500. They don't need to know that jargon or that terminology. They can link it to real world companies. That makes it just more visual, as you say, in there. And again, the tree analogy for investing just works so well, because when the stock market crashes, you can think of a tree being damaged, but then if you leave that tree, it will regrow. We know trees regrow, but also we know that when there's a big storm, there's generally lots of rain, and that means the soil is really soft and really good for planting more seeds. So it's trying to help. All right, when there's a storm, that's a good time to invest. Whereas most people, when there's a fall in the stock market, they get all worried and try and chop down their trees. So there's just so many good analogies and ways to explain the stock market using trees, and I've kind of expressed them in some of my blogs and posts on LinkedIn and elsewhere.
Wow. I must say that was so deep, and I believe personally, I have learned, and I know most of our viewers have learned how they can get to, teach kids these jargons, because they are very huge words, but if they put into action, or maybe let's say copy paste what you just said, I believe it will become more easier. And another thing I've noticed is that you, as a parent or as a guardian, it's important to always use the current happening to relate it to invest into a child. Like the way you said, when there was lockdown due to the pandemic, you try to explain to your amazing daughters that uh, we are now on lockdown. No one is going out, so no one is going to buy the pizza or the amazing burger. And we own a piece of this company, so definitely there is no money, and our share is going to reduce in price. If you give a child such a picture, because for kids, they want to see things real life. If you
Yes.
tell them, I saw it with a certain session I had. If you tell a child that save in this piggy bank, every day they'll be waking up wanting to open the piggy bank to see if indeed
Yeah.
the coins are still there. But if you make the piggy bank to be maybe a colorless one, then it makes the kid to see, oh, my money is going. Yesterday I had 1 coin, today or after 2 weeks I have 10 coins.
Yeah.
So they really want to see something in real, physically, so that they can relate it with what you are trying to say. So and this one will lead us to our next question, because I really like how you are breaking things down. From your experience teaching your children about investing, we realize that children's attention span is very, very minimal. How do we get their attention while teaching them about investing? Because kids can be very funny. You could be starting to teach them, then all of a sudden they run out. All of a
Yes.
sudden they start doing other stuff. So how do we get to get their attention span for that period you want to teach them?
Yeah. Again, I think it's trying to keep it very short. So don't try and overwhelm them, and trying to keep it engaging. And what your aim should be is that they don't become stock market experts after the first time that you talk to them. Even if they only remember the analogies or a little bit of the story after the first one, as long as they have some kind of recollection of some of either the McDonald's one in that case, or even if it's the tree analogy, even if they remember just that, and even if you just focus on trees growing and that's part of the investments, it can then just be part of a series, and you just kind of build up on that every time. And as they get older, they get understanding. Again, there's many period of time. There's no rush for them to be experts on day one. So for children, start the conversation, get them excited about them owning their piece of their company. And if they're starting to lose attention, that's fine. Just stop there. Then the next time, just kind of bring it back to where you were and move on a little bit. But it does not have to be a case of, oh, my kid doesn't listen to this, I give up. It's just sort of, even on different topics I talk to my children, they'll remember. So I use different tree analogies. So we have like purple trees for houses and stuff like that. They'll remember what a purple tree is, but they don't really remember the kind of different concepts around that. And then we'll just talk about it next time, and they'll go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Or they'll say, oh, I remember there was this purple tree, but I can't really remember what it meant. Can you? And then we'll just go back over it. And it's just no rush. But the more that they can remember the analogy, probably more so than the actual real world piece at a young age, it makes it so much more engaging. And it just produces a fun visual sort of language to talk about money with your kids. So yeah, my kids now, they probably don't know how much money they've got in their investments, but they know how many blue trees they've got, because that's what they say. How many blue trees do I have? How many does my sister have? And that's what they that's the way, the language they talk about it, rather than, because money itself can be very abstract to children. So talking in these kind of fun or sort of visual ways is a way to keep their attention, learn something, and again, even as parents, it makes it more engaging, because I've listened to so many talks about money and they can be quite dry. So even I think parents are quite enjoying some of the analogies, because it makes it more interesting for them to learn as well, not just for the children.
Yeah, exactly. Especially making it more engaging is very important. And as you said, it has to be short. You don't have to, put every information at the same time. You can break it down, every time you have a chance with them, just even if it's for 15 or 10 minutes, do something, but make it more engaging, because kids love fun. So long as there is fun, you have their attention. So, and this one gets us to our next question is, do you think it is advisable to let a child invest independently, and especially for teenagers? Because I've seen some people saying that now that my child is 13 years or 14 years, and we are in an era where kids have access to mobile phones, they can go online on their own. Do you think it's advisable to let a child invest independently, especially in the stock market? Like you let them pick the stock for themselves and go ahead and invest.
Yeah. No, my strong opinion is no. They should be investing, but it should be, as I say, investing in a low cost global investment fund, just because if they start picking companies, in my mind, it's not too dissimilar to going to pick their favorite racehorse at the racetrack, is in my opinion, because what will happen potentially is that if they do really well, if they pick a stock and then they look at it next month and it's gone up loads, they'll get really excited by it, and then they'll get potentially overconfident and go and do some more investing, and they probably might invest in more than they probably should because they think they're very good at this. And then the other side is that they could invest and have a very bad experience in the short term, and they'd be like, oh, this investing is rubbish. I don't like it. I just lost some of my money in the next kind of month. Or they might say, I need to do more now to sort of make up for the money that I've lost. And that's very, very akin to how people, when they go gambling, if they go and they gamble, and if they do well, they get addicted, and if they do badly, they either give up, which would be good, or they double down and try and win their money back. So I just believe that it will give the wrong impression of investing if kids are allowed to go off and pick their own stocks. I know it might be more fun, going back to it's much more fun to see how's my company doing, but it's more short term. And if you're going to invest, you have to worry about the long term, not the short term. You almost have to ignore what happens to your company in the short term. Have an understanding what might happen to it, as in, again, about the McDonald's and the virus story. But we don't really want kids to be going, oh, that company did well, I'm going to sell it, or that company did bad, I'm going to sell that or buy this, because that becomes a very much short-term mindset. And that's how loads of people who do invest lose money. So many people who are investing but are making that common mistake of looking at their stocks and trying to find the best company and then looking at it too often. So my view would be to help children understand the stock market using the examples already talked about. But in terms of the actual investments, it's actually quite boring. As I said, you just put a little bit of money every week and then don't really have a look at how it's doing on a day-to-day basis, because that's going to scare them probably more than help them.
Yeah, you are very right. I totally concur with you on that it's not really advisable to allow the kids to invest independently, because it might make them to be overconfident, or it might affect their esteem, especially if they choose something and they really lose a lot of money. It might really make them develop a bad attitude towards investing. And I bet we've seen people who've at one point they participated in gambling on lottery and they lost everything. You realize their attitude afterwards towards money is not the same. They are kind of having a very negative attitude, especially towards anything that tells them to put their money and it will multiply. They kind of have a negative attitude. And that is something, as a parent, as a guardian, you need to avoid letting your child get into such a situation by not allowing them to, start investing independently. And as we continue, thank you so much to our audience. I can see most of you are tuning in. We really appreciate your presence. I see Mr. John, you are requesting me to ask Mr. Rain how can he describe the attitude of people who like to have savings in bank, yet they can have viable opportunity to invest. Maybe you could,
Yeah.
touch base on that, Mr. Rain.
Yeah. So if I interpret the question, so no, if people who are already savings but want to invest is, if that's the interpretation of that question, then it's all about how much of that money do you need. So people should always have some money in savings because you need it for if there's like a rainy day or just an emergency, and having that money, or if there's something that you want to, you're going to have to spend in the near future, then that money should be kept in a savings. But if you do have some money that you don't need for the short term, and you do want that money to kind of grow, then investing is the right place. And so for the people who are new to investing, there's two options. One is you can actually go and see a financial advisor who will be able to help you understand those kind of options. Or there's plenty of resources around. One of the pieces that I kind of recommend is there's some really good books that help sort of essentially beginners' guides to investing, to give people that kind of comfort. So kind of what I've gone through there, but for going a little bit step further into what how to actually make an investment. And I have got some on my Bluetree website as well to help any of those who do want to get comfort around investing if they're already in savings to move that. But the key piece is to only put the money in investments that you don't need for at least probably 8 to 10 years is the kind of time horizon to really say, I don't need the money, I just want that money to grow over that period of time. It might not grow every year, but over that time it will.
That is very true. And the attitude, different people have different attitudes towards saving and investing. So it's important to save, but you need to consider when it comes to investing, after what period of time will you be needing the money, either in form of cash flow or in form of whichever form. So time is very important when you are choosing whether to save or invest. You need to know what kind of time are you also willing to wait so that you can get the money back together with a profit or interest. Now for the interest of time, we'll go to our next question is, what resources are best to introduce investing to teenagers? Because we have a lot of resources out here. Maybe as an advisor, which ones would you recommend that you believe they are best for people to use them?
Yeah, this is the really hard bit, because there's just not that many resources available for children or parents, teenagers, about this topic, and hence one of the main reasons I started my business to really kind of help fill that void. Now there are probably a better bit is to kind of reinforce that view that I had earlier, that what you want to avoid in terms of resources is that there are trading games, in stock trading games, that are aimed at children. So they're saying, introduce your kids to investing by getting them to practice with virtual, like pretend money, and get them to pick their own companies and see how they get on. So if you did sort of do a Google search on resources, those kind of pieces would come up. And my strong advice is to kind of ignore those. And then again, in terms of resources, there's my Bluetree blog to help, which is really targeted at this. Then there's the probably the next best is, there are some good books. As I say, there's one of the good books I'd recommend is a book called Unshakable by Tony Robbins, the sort of the guru on lots of different topics, but it just helps. It goes to very plain basics about investing it gives, and it can be read by teenagers, it can be read by parents, it can be read by anybody, and it really goes through a lot of what I've kind of said, but in kind of book format. So that would be a big resource. But then there's a lot of financial advisors out there as well who would be more than happy to sort of support any of those who want to sort of want someone to hold their hand as they sort of enter this journey of investing. And again, that's probably going to be mostly for the parents, but there's no reason why the children should not go along to meet those advisors.
Yeah, and this actually brings me to something that just came up in my mind. Do you think it's important when you as a parent, you are going to maybe do a transaction or to meet your relationship manager in the bank or your investment manager? Do you think it's wise to carry your kids along, or we should always just leave them back? What is your opinion on that?
So I think it's a great idea to do that at least once. It shouldn't be every time, because it will be in sort of jargon, technical terms, and it'll be hard. But I think just at least once, take your kids along, and it has so many benefits, because what it first of all does, and I think this is really important, it helps your kids understand that talking about money with someone is fine. So it breaks that kind of taboo where no one talks about money, where it's showing you as a parent that you're happy to talk about money, and therefore money isn't this subject that we shouldn't talk about. And if you're taking, especially if you take your kids along, it's saying not only is it not a taboo, but it's also completely fine to ask for help about money. And again, there's so many adults today who are suffering with financial stress because they're not talking to anyone. they're holding, and they're so worried about looking silly in front of someone else because they've never talked about money, and it's causing a lot of pain. And if children can see it, it's perfectly fine to go and talk to an advisor or a bank manager or someone else about money. I think it just shows when they're growing up that it's okay to do that, and therefore even if they are struggling, they're going to ask for help, and that's always going to be the first road to overcoming any stress, is to ask for help. So I very much strongly encourage it. And plus, if the children hear something in that meeting, they can ask questions, maybe not during the meeting, but afterwards. Again, just opens that curiosity into money. And the earlier that curiosity starts, the more they're likely to engage and grow up to be financially healthier.
Yeah, actually, I really like the idea that you brought across. It will help them understand that talking about money conversation is okay, and it will actually help them to, not to feel shy. And I think that is one of the problems we are facing currently in our generation, because when we were growing up, money conversations were not made to be that public and all that. So most people, their mindset is that when it comes to talking about money, even if I'm making mistakes or I'm in deep mess, I don't want to tell anyone, because we grew up knowing that about money you don't talk about it, but you can talk about everything else. So I really agree with you on that, as it will help the kids to be exposed and also know that it's okay to talk about money. It's okay to seek for advice. It's okay to share your, money goals with someone else, especially a professional, so that they can advise you on the way forward. So as we are about to end the session, we'll go to the next question. Maybe you could mention to us the lessons that we can teach teenagers about long-term investing, because during that teenagehood period, teenagers become very curious, and they also do not have that much patience. If you tell them that their money is going to multiply, they want it like tomorrow. They want to see something or some results. So maybe you could tell us some lessons we need to teach our teenagers on long-term investing.
Yeah, I think the two key ones, A, is using the tree analogy again, just to say that it just visual. You can't plant a seed, and then go look the next day and see if your tree's there. I think the more that they can see. So the story that there's a guy in India called Jadva Pang, and 40 years ago he actually planted a seed in a sort of barren wasteland in northern India, and now 40 years later he's got his own forest, which is bigger than Central Park in New York City. It has lions and tigers and elephants in this, and it just shows that even if it started with one seed and then kind of went back, that power of patience can have great impact. So that's one piece. And the other piece is getting them excited that once they do have that patience, that over long term, they can go to sleep and wake up knowing that they've got more money than when they went to bed. And I think that kind of excites some teenagers and piece. And it just shows that's what the really wealthy people do. And if you want to be in that kind of group, and especially at teenagers, they are kind of competitive. They see that kind of wealth. That's what they do. Yeah. They invest their money, and they don't have full-time jobs because they're living off their savings and investments. And they started many years ago. They might be wealthy now, but that's because they took that time to do that. So getting teenagers to understand and give those kind of long-term mindset and the benefits of that can really get them excited, and being very open with them that the short term is pretty slow and pretty boring, but if they persevere, then they'll be steps ahead of pretty much most of their peers.
Yeah, actually, I think that is a very nice idea you've given us, because, you know, we need to let them know that good things take time. If you want something good, you need to also know that it will require your patience as well. You mentioned one book, as you were saying, you just mentioned one book that you'd recommend us. I think I wrote it down here, The Unshakable by Tony Robbins. So to our viewers, this is a book you need to check out. That is aside from the Blue Tree Saving website. It is a website that has a lot of resources. Maybe Mr. Rainey, you could share with us any other books that we can, check out, so that we can be able to learn how to, help our children and teenagers to, manage money and invest.
Yeah, so it's any book that's either about or written by Warren Buffett, who's one of the richest men in the world, and he is one of the most successful investors. But he also has a very, very simple approach to what he does, and so any of his books I very strongly recommend. And his kind of famous sort of one of the quotes was there, going back to the last point that you made about patience, is he was having a conversation, I think it was with Jeff Bezos of Amazon, and Jeff said to Warren, "You've become so rich and your strategy is so simple. Why doesn't everyone just copy you?" And then his answer was that people don't have the patience. And it just shows that this man, he said he got very, very wealthy by being patient, and the stock market just transfers wealth from the impatient to the patient. Any kind of book by Warren Buffett, and just those kind of little thought pieces going through how someone who's very, very rich and got very rich off the stock market in a very pragmatic, simple way can really be inspiring for a lot of younger people. Just on my website, as I say, you mentioned it's bluetreesavings.com. That's actually for a tool for parents to use with their children to help them see their financial forest grow every time they receive money. But I also have my website, which has all my content, which is bluetreeblog.com. So that's where I release my weekly kind of articles to help parents teach their kids about money. And tomorrow I've got a whole blog about the different analogies using trees. So please check that out.
Yeah, thank you so much. And maybe to our audience, if you have any question, this is the time you can write to us in the comment section as we are about to wind up the show for today. Mr. Rainey, maybe you could share with us any other contact in which someone can reach out to you in case they need further guidance or they have any question that they feel you are the right person to ask.
Sure. So yeah, please contact me directly at will@bluetreesavings.com. So that's my email, and I'll respond. I also post pretty much every day on LinkedIn. So just Will Rainey. And yeah, please leave me a direct message on there, or just a comment on my posts, or anyway, and I'll get in contact with you. I also have a Facebook page, so Bluetree Will Rainey. You can check out there and again get in contact me via there. But yeah, direct email is will@bluetreesavings.com.
Wow, perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Rainey. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate you, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. Personally, I have gotten to learn a lot, and I've gotten a different perspective, which I'll be using, and of course, will be sharing out with my clients. And to our viewers, once again, thank you so much for your time. We believe you have learned a lot. This is the time we need to start practicing what we are sharing here to your children. If you are if you're a teacher, try to incorporate some of these lessons in your curriculum, as well as try to put it out there so that more people can get to understand how they can teach children about money. So until then, we really want to appreciate you. Thank you to all those that have subscribed. If you haven't, please press the subscribe button below there, turn on notification, and keep on watching our videos. Until then, we encourage you to keep on sanitizing, wearing a mask, and maintaining social distancing so that together we can combat this COVID-19. Mr. Will, maybe if you have any parting shot before we end the show?
No, thank you very much for having me on this show. I really like your other videos and the work that you're doing. And yeah, thank you very much for having me on here.
Sure, thank you so much. Once again, we really appreciate you. Bye, and see you in our next episode. Bye.
Bye-bye.